My phone buzzed in the pocket of my worn-out jacket, a short vibration that made my heart sink. I sat in the old armchair in my cramped kitchen, the weak fluorescent light flickering overhead. The screen lit up with a stark message: insufficient funds to pay the utility bill for 256 Oak Street. I stared at it, a familiar bitter pang rising in my chest. It was not the first time, nor would it be the last. The bill was not for me. It was for the house on the outskirts of Springfield where my parents still lived, where my childhood with Tyler was woven into golden summer days and freezing winter nights. I am Ethan Harris, 33, a plumber in Springfield, Missouri. My life is nothing extraordinary. I live alone in a small rented apartment in an old neighborhood near downtown where the cobblestone streets are cracked and the faint smell of old paint lingers in the air. My apartment is tiny, just enough space for a single bed, a chipped wooden table, and a kitchen corner cluttered with repair tools. Every day I wake at 500 a.m., drive my beat-up truck to job sites, fix leaking pipes, replace valves, or handle issues people ignore until they become problems. My income covers rent, gas, and some groceries, but most of it flows elsewhere to the house on Oak Street. Oak Street is where I grew up, where childhood memories remain vivid, as if they happened yesterday. That old wooden house with its rusted tin roof and peeling walls is all my parents have. My father, Daniel Harris, 63, was once a tractor repairman, a tough, prideful man, almost stubbornly so. He always wore faded flannel shirts, his hands calloused from a lifetime of work. But a workplace accident stole his health. A faulty tractor left him with a broken femur and a damaged spine. Since then, he has been retired, living on a meager pension. And he used to be proud of me, calling me the man of the family. But in recent years, his gaze has shifted cold, sometimes harsh, as if his dependence on me is a stain on his pride. My mother, Linda Harris, 59, is a gentle but fragile woman. She has a sad smile, her eyes always holding a faint glimmer of hope for a better life. She used to work at a grocery store sewing late into the night to earn extra money, but the grind has worn her down. She has always dreamed of our family making it big. And in that dream, she placed all her faith in Tyler, my younger brother, whom she believed would achieve something great. Tyler, 27, is a different story. Smart, quick-witted, and gifted with a silver tongue that makes people trust him. He studied business in college but was never truly serious. Spoiled by our parents from a young age, Tyler became entitled. He racked up debts for investments in vague projects, lost money, and turned to me to bail him out. To him, my help was a given, as if I was born to clean up his messes. I do not resent him, not because I do not want to, but because I cannot. To me, family is everything, even if it feels like a weight pressing down on my shoulders every day. For the past 10 years, I have covered nearly all the family's expenses. Medication for my father, hospital bills when my mother collapsed from exhaustion, roof repairs, when rain leaked through, and Tyler's tuition and debts. I cannot remember the last time I bought something for myself. A new pair of shoes, a meal at a restaurant, a trip to unwind. Those are luxuries I cannot afford. I once had a chance for a promotion at the plumbing company, a regional manager position, but I turned it down because it required relocating and I could not leave my family behind. Personal relationships faded too. I dated a woman, Emily, a few years ago, but she left when she realized I could not make time for anyone but my family. My parents used to say I was their pride. My mother would hug me, her voice trembling. "Ethan, you are the most beautiful son," her eyes glistening as I handed over money to fix the old heater in the house. My father, a man of few words, would pat my shoulder and say, "When we are gone, this house will be yours. You deserve it all." That promise was written in an old will my mother kept carefully in the dining room drawer. I never cared about inheritance, but that piece of paper gave my sacrifices meaning. A silent thread tying me to them, to the old house on Oak Street. But now, sitting in my cramped kitchen, staring at the phone's notification, I felt only exhaustion. Not resentment, not anger, but a deep bone-weary fatigue, as if my entire body was sinking into a dark pool. I have done everything for them. Dad, Mom, Tyler. Not out of duty, but because it is the only way I know to feel I still have a family to care for. Yet every time I check my bank balance, every time another bill arrives, I ask myself, what am I doing with my life? The next morning, a rare Sunday off, I was jolted awake by the shrill ring of my phone. It was my mother, her voice trembling, not with the usual worry, but with an unfamiliar excitement. "Ethan, come to the house right now. It is huge." She spoke quickly, almost shouting, then hung up before I could ask anything. I sat up, my mind foggy. Huge. In my family, huge usually meant another bill, one of Tyler's debts, or yet another repair for the old house. I sighed, threw on my worn jacket, and drove to Oak Street. When I arrived, the small street was buzzing. Neighbors gathered in the front yard, their laughter and chatter filling the air, some snapping photos with their phones. A news van from the local paper was parked by the gate, and a reporter was interviewing my mother with a microphone. Mom, in her faded floral dress with her hair neatly tied back, was smiling so brightly I barely recognized her. Dad stood beside her, his back slightly hunched, but his eyes gleaming as if he had rediscovered the man he was 12 years ago. Tyler leaned against the doorframe, a smug grin on his face as if he were the center of all the attention. Ethan, Mom cried out when she saw me, rushing over to throw her arms around me. "You will not believe it. We won the lottery. $12 million, Ethan. 12 million. She grabbed my hands, tears sparkling in her eyes. Not from worry this time, but from joy. I stood frozen, trying to process the news. $12 million for our family. That number was like a dream. Dad approached, clapping me hard on the shoulder. "Good right, son. We are finally free from this miserable life." I smiled genuinely. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lift. I thought of the bills that would no longer haunt us, of Mom not having to sew through the night, of Dad getting his medications without me scrambling to cover the cost. "I am happy for you," I said, my voice. "Really." And I meant it. In that moment, I saw our family as it used to be. The days we huddled under blankets to stay warm. When Dad told stories about his time on the farm, when Mom sang lullabies to Tyler, I thought maybe we would finally be okay. But that joy did not last long. Within weeks, the atmosphere in the family shifted. The money arrived, and with it came whispers, plans, and a change in how my parents looked at me. Tyler, as always, became the center of every conversation. He talked about investment opportunities, on doubling the money and building a business empire. Mom listened, her eyes shining as if Tyler were a genius. Dad, though quieter, nodded along, trusting in his youngest son's vision. I sat through the rare family dinners at Oak Street, listening to Tyler ramble about the stock market, real estate, and things I did not understand. "Ethan, what do you think?" Mom asked, once her eyes hopeful. I stopped chewing, set my fork down, and searched for the gentlest words. "I think we should be careful. This is a lot of money, but it can disappear fast if we do not manage it right. Maybe put it in the bank or hire a professional financial advisor." I looked at Dad, hoping he would agree. He used to be cautious, always teaching me that easy come, easy go. But Dad just snorted, his eyes cold. "Careful, Ethan. You are always just careful. Tyler understands the times better than you. He has got a business degree. You fix pipes." His words cut like a knife, sharp and unexpected. I fell silent, feeling something stripped away. Mom quickly tried to smooth things over. "Ethan, that is not what Dad meant. It is just Tyler has big ideas, you know." But I knew her gaze had shifted to Tyler, as if I were an outsider. From then on, things changed faster than I could have imagined. Tyler convinced my parents to let him manage the entire lottery winnings. He rented a small office in downtown Springfield, calling himself an investor, and started spending as if the money would never run out. My parents, instead of questioning him, were proud. "Tyler will take our family to new heights," Mom said, her voice full of conviction. I tried to offer advice a few more times, but each time I got head shakes or veiled comments about being too conservative or lacking ambition. Tyler was worse. Once he looked at me with a smirk. "You stick to fixing pipes, big brother. Leave the big stuff to me." I did not argue. I have never been good at arguing with family. But every time I left Oak Street, I felt smaller, as if my place in the family was fading. Then one day, Mom called me to the house, her voice serious. "Ethan, come for dinner tonight. We have something important to discuss." I agreed, though a sinking feeling stirred in my gut. When I stepped into the Oak Street house, the smell of roasted meat and cornbread, my childhood favorites, filled the air, but the atmosphere was oppressively heavy. Dad sat at the head of the table, his face stern. Mom busied herself serving food, but her eyes avoided mine. Tyler was absent, which made me even more uneasy. Dinner began in silence. I tried to make conversation, asking about Dad's health, about the little garden Mom had started, but their responses were mere grunts. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and pushed his plate aside. "Ethan," he said, his voice low but cold. "We need to talk about the family's future." He reached into the dining room drawer and pulled out an old yellowed piece of paper neatly folded. My heart pounded. I recognized it instantly. The will Mom had shown me years ago, promising that the Oak Street house, everything they had, would be mine. Dad placed it on the table in front of me, but his eyes held no warmth. "This is the old will," he said, his tone chillingly calm. "We have thought long and hard, and we have made a new one. From now on, everything this house, the assets, will go to Tyler." I felt the blood drain from my body. I stared at the paper, its familiar creases, the handwritten lines Mom had once shown me with pride. "You are our pride, Ethan," she had said. But now she sat there, head bowed, unable to meet my gaze. "Ethan," she whispered, "you are grown. You can take care of yourself. Tyler, he needs this chance more. Tyler needs this chance." I repeated, my voice trembling. "What about me? What have I done for this family for the past 10 years? I did not shout, but my voice was louder than I intended. Dad frowned, his eyes sharp. "Do not make this difficult, Ethan. You are the eldest. You should understand. Tyler has vision. You are fine." Fine. That word hit me like a punch to the face. I stood, my hands shaking as I picked up the old will. I folded it carefully as if it were fragile. "I do not need the inheritance," I said, looking straight into Dad's eyes. "But I need to know if your promises ever meant anything." No one answered. Mom started crying, but she said nothing to stop me from leaving. I walked out of the house, my steps heavy. That night, Springfield felt colder than usual. Or maybe it was just me. I brought the old will back to my apartment, tucking it into a drawer. Not because I wanted the house, but because it was the only proof of a promise that once felt real. From that day on, I was no longer invited to family meetings, no longer asked for my opinion, no longer part of their plans. The money I thought would bring happiness to our family had instead pushed me out of it. The months that followed saw my parents' and Tyler's lives transform so quickly I could hardly keep up. They left Oak Street, the rickety old house with its rusted tin roof and rotting fence, for a luxurious mansion in Clayton, Missouri, an upscale neighborhood with pristine cobblestone streets and perfectly manicured trees. I heard from neighbors that Mom cried as they left, not out of nostalgia but out of excitement. "We are finally living the life we deserve," she told an elderly neighbor, her voice brimming with pride. Dad did not say much, but his eyes lit up as he stepped into the new house. A 3-story mansion with a sparkling pool and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking lush green fields. Dad, Daniel Harris, once a man who knew only tractors and worn-out work boots, now drove a flashy red sports car, the kind I had only seen in commercials. He started collecting expensive watches, which he called heirlooms. I heard he joined an exclusive golf club for the elite, where he bragged about his life-changing opportunity and mingled with people he had never dared approach before. Mom, Linda Harris, transformed into someone else entirely. She ditched her faded floral dresses for designer outfits, went to the spa weekly, and joined high society women's groups in Clayton, Missouri. She texted me once, rarely boasting about a trip to Paris, where she saw the Eiffel Tower sparkling under the moonlight. I read the message, gave a faint smile, but felt only distance in my heart. Tyler, of course, was the brightest star in their glittering new world. He started an investment firm, hanging a sleek sign in downtown St. Louis, calling himself a successful young entrepreneur. His social media overflowed with images. Tyler on a yacht. Tyler raising a glass of champagne at a pool party. Tyler in a tailored suit in front of a skyscraper with the caption, "Vision leads the future." He spoke of success and youthful ambition, as if he had built it all himself, not with the $12 million from our parents' lottery win. His posts racked up hundreds of likes, dozens of fawning comments from new friends I knew were only there for the money. They lived a dazzling, extravagant life, but never invited me along. Not a single invitation to the Clayton, Missouri mansion. Not a call to check in. Not a text to share their joy. I heard they threw a grand party to celebrate Tyler the Harris family's great success. Old neighbors said the whole town was invited from their new elite friends to people who once lived near Oak Street. They set up a white tent in the mansion's yard, hired a live band, and served dishes I had never heard of. But I did not get an invitation, not a card, not a message. I stood on the sidelines, a stranger, while my family reveled, indulged, and forgot I existed. They did not share a single cent of the lottery money with me. $12 million, a staggering sum, flowed through their hands like water into luxury cars, European vacations, designer clothes. But not a dime came my way. I had hoped just once they would call me over and say, "Ethan, you have done so much for the family. Here is something to thank you." I did not need money for cars or trips. I just wanted a sign that they remembered the years I sacrificed. But no, they spent as if the money would never run out. And I, who had once been their pillar, was not part of their life-changing dream. I overheard Mom bragging to a neighbor about giving Tyler a $12,000 watch to celebrate his success. I stood there hearing the story, my heart constricting. $12,000, the amount I had worked an entire year to cover Tyler's debts, used by Mom for a gift, while I did not even get a thank you. Every time I scrolled through social media, I saw my family. Mom in a silk dress at a 5-star restaurant. Dad beside his new sports car. Tyler toasting wine at an elite party. They posted about triumphant success and living the dream, but never mentioned me. One of Tyler's posts stopped me cold. The Harris family from Oak Street to the top. Below was a photo of the three of them. Dad, Mom, and Tyler smiling radiantly in front of a French chateau. I stared at it, searching for any trace of myself, but there was nothing. Not a word, not a mention. I was the one who kept the Oak Street house from falling apart, paid the utilities, bought Dad's medicine, covered Tyler's tuition. But in their story of success, I did not exist. Meanwhile, I lived as I always had. My small Springfield apartment was where I returned each night after long days at job sites. I woke at 5:00 a.m., put on my worn uniform, drove my beat-up truck to houses, factories, or malls to fix pipes. The work never stopped. A leaking pipe in a basement, a broken faucet at a school, a clogged drain in a restaurant. I worked tirelessly, my hands stained with grease, my back aching when I got home as the city lights came on. My life was simple, repetitive, with no room for grand dreams like Tyler's. I called Mom once, hoping for an explanation, an apology, or just a check-in, but she only said a few curt words. "Ethan, I am busy. We are planning a trip to Switzerland. Are you okay?" I said I was fine, though. I knew she did not really care. She hung up, and I did not call back. I realized I had been forgotten, pushed to the margins like an old item no longer valued in their new home. The contrast between us grew stark, like parallel lines that never meet. The richer they got, the lonelier I became. The more they flaunted, the quieter I stayed. I kept working, paying rent, buying cheap coffee near job sites. Sometimes I wondered if I was living wrong. Should I be like Tyler, chasing big dreams instead of accepting this simple life? But then I shook my head, telling myself I did not need those things. I just needed a family, something I had lost, not to poverty, but to money. I did not resent my parents or Tyler. I was just tired, a deep exhaustion beyond the 12-hour workdays. I kept living, kept working, kept my simple rhythm. But every night, lying in my single bed in that small apartment, I heard my heartbeat and asked myself, what do I have left when family is no longer family? That Thursday afternoon, my boss sent me to fix a water leak in the basement of a shopping mall in St. Louis. In the damp, dimly lit basement, I worked diligently for 2 hours, repairing the pipe and preparing to leave. But as I stepped into the grand lobby, surrounded by elegant lighting and the hum of music from the shopping area, I froze. There, amidst the crowd, was Tyler. He stood in the center of the lobby, dressed like a movie star, a crisp white dress shirt, a tailored navy suit, and polished leather shoes gleaming under the lights. Around him was a group of friends, young, stylish people laughing loudly. Tyler was telling a story, his hands gesturing animatedly, a smug smile on his lips. I meant to slip by unnoticed. I knew how I looked, a stained work uniform, sweat-soaked hair, hands still smudged with grease. I did not belong in this world. His world. But Tyler saw me. His eyes flicked over, then lingered as if he had spotted something amusing. "Ethan!" he called out loudly, his voice echoing through the lobby, drawing the attention of his friends and a few passers-by. I stopped, gripping the handle of my toolbox tightly. "Tyler," I replied, my voice quiet but audible. He strode over, the smile on his face no longer that of a brother, but of someone eager to prove something. "Everyone, this is my brother Ethan," he announced, turning to his friends with an exaggerated flourish. "Springfield's plumbing hero." A few giggles rippled through the group. I felt the blood rush to my face, but I stayed silent, trying to hide my discomfort. "Still fixing pipes, huh, bro?" Tyler went on, his tone mocking. "Out here getting dirty every day. Do not you ever get tired of it?" He scanned me from head to toe as if I were a curious exhibit in a museum. His friends laughed louder, a girl in a red dress covering her mouth, her eyes glinting with amusement. I stood there, feeling the floor beneath me crumble. But I said nothing. I had never been good at fighting back. "You know," Tyler continued, stepping closer, his voice lowering but still loud enough for everyone to hear. "Our family does not need you anymore. You are stuck doing these odd jobs while we have moved on. Do not you feel outdated? A failure who cannot seize an opportunity?" The word failure cut like a knife, sharp and cold. His friends laughed again, louder this time. A few passers-by glanced at me, their eyes a mix of curiosity and pity. Each look felt like a needle piercing my skin. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I had paid off his debts, bought Dad's medicine, fixed the roof so Mom would not freeze. I wanted to ask what he had done these past 10 years besides spend money and show off. But I did not say anything. I just stood there, my grip on the toolbox so tight my knuckles turned white. I looked into Tyler's eyes, searching for a trace of the little brother who used to chase me to play basketball. But all I saw was arrogance and distance. "Wish you success," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I turned quietly, gathered my tools, and ignored the laughter and whispers behind me. I walked away through the dazzling lights of the lobby, past the eyes watching me. I did not belong here, and I did not need to prove it. Outside the mall, the cold St. Louis air enveloped me. I paused by my truck, taking a deep breath to push away the emptiness crushing my chest. I felt regret. Regret for the brother who was once part of me. Regret for the family I thought would always be there. I opened the truck door, tossed my toolbox onto the back seat, and drove back to Springfield. The city faded behind me, but Tyler's laughter and the pitying looks of strangers echoed in my mind. I drove through the night back to Springfield, the streetlights casting fleeting shadows across my weary face. Tyler's words, "a failure who cannot seize an opportunity," cut into my pride like a knife. I was not angry, just hollow and small, humiliated by my own brother. When I reached my dark apartment, I sank onto the couch without bothering to turn on the light. Tyler's laughter still haunted me. And the worst part was that he was not entirely wrong. I did not belong in their world of glittering lights and lavish parties. I was just a plumber, grease-stained, living in a cramped rented apartment. Closing my eyes, I saw the old house on Oak Street, its musty smell and memories of poverty, the only place I had ever felt I truly had a family. I remembered that house where every winter cold winds seeped through cracked windows, forcing us to huddle under blankets in the living room to stay warm. The tin roof leaked during rain, and as a kid I would scramble to find buckets to catch the drips. Dad Daniel Harris would sit there, his calloused hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, hiding the pain from his old back injury. He used to be a strong man, working tirelessly on the farm, fixing tractors from dawn to dusk. But when he drank, he became someone else. "I am useless," he would mutter, eyes red, voice trembling. "But Tyler, he will do what I could not." He pinned all his hopes on Tyler, my smart but stubborn younger brother, whom he believed would make it big for the family. Mom Linda Harris was different. Her gentleness was always tinged with an indescribable sadness. She worked at a grocery store sewing late into the night to earn extra money, and once collapsed from exhaustion right on the kitchen floor. I was 15, rushing into the living room to find her there, her hands still clutching a needle. Panicked, I called Dad, and we took her to the hospital. When she woke, she gave a weak smile and said, "Ethan, you are stronger than me. You can take care of yourself. But Tyler, he is still young. He needs support." I nodded, though I did not understand why she always put Tyler above me. But I did not resent her. I just thought as the eldest I had to be strong to ease their worries. When I was 18, everything changed. Dad had his accident. A faulty tractor broke his femur and damaged his spine. The hospital became our second home, with bills piling up like a mountain. Mom cried every night, and Tyler, only 12, then sat silently in the corner, eyes red. I knew what I had to do. I dropped out of school, abandoning my dream of college to take any job I could find. Plumbing, hauling, car washing to pay for Dad's medicine and Tyler's tuition. Some days I ate only one meal, usually a cheap loaf of bread from the grocery store. My only clothes were worn and patched, used year-round. But I did not complain. Every time I saw Tyler head to school with his backpack, every time Mom smiled when I handed over money to fix the heater, it felt worth it. I did not need thanks. Seeing my parents at ease, knowing Tyler had opportunities I never did, made me happy. Even knowing my parents favored Tyler, I never held it against them. I thought it was normal. I was the eldest. I had to sacrifice. Those years were tough, but filled with love. We huddled under blankets, shared watery soup on lean days. Dad patted my shoulder, calling me his pride. Mom hugged me, tears in her eyes when I paid to fix the leaky roof. Those moments made me believe family was worth everything. But now, sitting in my small apartment, those memories only deepened my pain. I opened the drawer, pulling out the old will, the yellowed paper Mom once showed me, promising the Oak Street house would be mine. I held it, my fingers tracing its familiar folds, and realized they had forgotten everything. Forgotten the nights I worked to exhaustion, the meals I skipped so Tyler could study, the years I carried the family. Poverty never tore us apart. But when money came, they lost what mattered most, family and gratitude. I folded the will, tucked it back in the drawer, and lay on the bed. Tyler's laughter echoed in my mind, but I did not cry. I just felt a profound regret. Not for my unfinished education, but for the sacrifices that were now just a memory. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but the image of the leaky house on Oak Street pulled me back, reminding me of a family we once had, a family that loved each other before money made it all vanish. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, but the memory of the leaky house on Oak Street pulled me back, as if reminding me that my family once existed, once loved each other before money made it all vanish. Tyler's mocking laughter, the pitying looks from strangers at the mall, and the old will in my drawer. They played like an old film looping in my mind. But I did not let myself drown in that pain forever. I had learned that if I could not change the past, I could still move forward. And life, in its own way, gave me a chance. A year after the incident at the mall, I was still living the same life. Waking early, driving my beat-up truck to job sites, fixing pipes, and returning to my small apartment as the city lit up. The work had not changed, but I had. I started noticing the small details in my trade, how an old pipe could tell the story of an entire building, how a single joint could save a system. I was not just working for money anymore. I worked to be good, to prove I was not the failure Tyler had called me. One afternoon, the company sent me to a large office building in downtown St. Louis. It was a major project, a contract worth hundreds of thousands to maintain the entire plumbing system. I arrived with my familiar toolbox and started work as usual. But a few hours in chaos erupted. A main pipe in the basement burst, flooding the floor and threatening the building's electrical system. The supervising engineers, dressed in sharp suits and clutching tablets, ran around shouting into radios, but no one could pinpoint the cause. I knelt by the pipe, my flashlight illuminating rusted joints. The roar of rushing water, the engineers' yells, and the pressure of a collapsing contract created a storm-like atmosphere. The lead engineer, middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, looked at me with near desperation. "Ethan, do you see anything? If we do not fix this, we will lose the contract." I did not answer immediately, focusing on every detail. 10 years of plumbing, of grease-stained hands and sleepless nights, guided me now. After a few minutes, I found the issue. An old pressure valve had jammed, causing excessive strain on the main pipe. I quickly proposed a temporary fix, releasing pressure through auxiliary valves and replacing a section of pipe. "We need 3 hours to fix it completely," I said, my voice calm but firm. The lead engineer looked at me, half doubting, but he had no other choice. "Do it," he said. My team and I worked relentlessly. Water sprayed everywhere. My hands froze, but I did not stop. 3 hours later, the flood ceased and the system stabilized. As I stood, my back aching, the lead engineer clapped my shoulder, a rare smile breaking across his face. "You saved us, Ethan." But it was not him who truly noticed me. It was the company's director, Mr. Thompson, a tall man with sharp eyes. He had watched from the corner the entire time, and when it was over, he called me to his temporary office at the site. "Ethan," he said, his voice deep and weighty, "you are not just skilled. You stay calm under pressure. We need people like you." He offered me a promotion to technical manager, a position with double my current salary and the chance to work on bigger projects. He also introduced me to industry contacts looking for reliable maintenance teams. I stood there, hands still dirty, hardly believing my ears. I managed a quiet thank you, but inside a spark ignited. For the first time in years, I felt recognized. A few years later, I used my savings from the new job to start my own small maintenance company, Harris Fix. The name was simple but meaningful to me. With just 5 employees, we worked with all our heart. I did not promise grand things like Tyler did, only reliability. Slowly, clients came. From small restaurants to large office buildings, they called because I never let them down. Each new contract felt like reclaiming a piece of the life I thought I had lost. During that time, I met Elena. She was an administrator at one of my job sites. Elena was not flashy. She had brown hair tied high, a gentle smile, and eyes that shone with sincerity. The first time we talked, she asked about my work not with casual curiosity, but genuine interest. "You must be really skilled to handle such complex systems," she said, and I laughed, feeling at ease for the first time in months. Elena admired my dedication, and I was drawn to her kindness. We talked more, from work stories to small dreams I had never dared share. 2 years later, we married in a simple ceremony on the outskirts of Springfield. Just a few friends, colleagues, and laughter as we cut a homemade wedding cake. A year after that, Elena gave birth to our daughter Samantha, with big round eyes like her mother's, and a smile that melted me every time. My life now was waking up beside Elena, hearing Samantha babble in her crib, and working days that felt not like a burden, but a source of pride. I became a steady man with a small family and a stable business. I stopped caring what my parents or Tyler thought of me. I stopped scrolling through their flashy social media posts. I lived quietly, caring for my new family and working with all the kindness I had. Oak Street. The old Will and Tyler's insults became distant memories. I had found happiness not in money but in the simplest things: a home, a loving wife, and my daughter's laughter. Every morning I woke up next to Elena, hearing Samantha's babbling from the next room, and I felt that my life, though not glamorous, was complete. My small company, Harris Fix, ran steadily, bringing in a stable income and respect from clients. I no longer dwelled on Oak Street, the old Will or Tyler's insults. My life now was filled with peaceful days, family dinners, and the joy of watching Samantha grow. But life, as it always does, had its own way of pulling me back to the past. 5 years had passed since I left the St. Louis Mall, carrying the sting of Tyler's mockery. In all that time, I heard nothing from my family. No calls, no texts, not even a mention on social media. They had vanished from my life as if I had never existed. I did not seek them out, not out of anger, but because I had learned that sometimes letting go is the only way to keep your heart from breaking. But one early autumn afternoon, as I sat in the small office of Harris Fix reviewing a new contract, my phone rang. It was Linda, an old neighbor from Oak Street. Her voice trembled over the line as if she were holding back something heavy. "Ethan, do you know what is happening with your family?" she asked. I frowned, a sinking feeling rising in my chest. "No, Mom." "What is going on?" She sighed, then told me a story I never could have imagined. Tyler, the successful young entrepreneur with his flashy social media posts, had fallen into deep trouble. His investment firms, built on our parents' lottery winnings, were under investigation for financial fraud. The partners who once fawned over him when he spent freely began pulling their money out. His cash flow froze and debts surfaced like cracks in a dam. Local papers ran sensational headlines about the young entrepreneur and his fall from grace. I sat there listening to Linda, feeling like I was watching a movie whose ending I had predicted. But what stunned me was what happened to my parents. Daniel and Linda Harris, despite knowing Tyler's troubles, blindly trusted him. They sold off items from their lavish Clayton, Missouri mansion, from Dad's collectible watches to Mom's designer clothes. Mom even sold her wedding ring, the one she had sworn to keep until her dying day. They took out bank loans, mortgaged the house, and funneled money to Tyler, hoping he would weather the crisis. "Tyler will figure it out," Linda recounted, Mom saying, her voice bitter. They believed he was the family's savior. But just months later, Tyler vanished. The news reported he had fled the state, taking what remained of the money, the funds our parents had poured into saving him. No explanation, no apology. He left them drowning in debt with unpayable bills and a mansion, now an empty shell. Dad, unable to bear the shock, suffered a mild stroke. He spent weeks in the hospital. His speech slurred, his once calloused hands trembling, unable to hold a glass of water. Mom broke down mentally, no longer the woman who bragged about Paris trips. She grew quiet, her eyes vacant, as if all hope had been drained. They were forced to sell the mansion to cover part of the debt, but it was not nearly enough to offset Tyler's damage. The elite friends, the high society women's groups, the people who flocked to them when they won the lottery, all turned their backs. No one wanted to be tied to a family mired in scandal. Friends, relatives, those who once visited Oak Street to celebrate the win, were nowhere to be found. My parents, from the heights of wealth, plummeted to the depths of loneliness and illness. When Linda finished, I sat still, phone in hand, my mind blank. I did not feel hatred, not really, just a deep bitterness, as if every warning I had given years ago about being careful with money, about not entrusting everything to Tyler, had come true. I remember trying to advise them, only to be brushed off as too conservative, lacking ambition. Tyler understands the times better than you, Dad had said. And now Tyler was gone, leaving them in the wreckage of a dream they thought would last forever. I did not call my parents or seek them out. Not because I did not care, but because I did not know how to face them. In my heart, they were still my parents. But they were also the ones who erased me from their lives, who chose Tyler over me. I went home, held Samantha close, listening to her giggle as I told her about fish in a lake. Elena watched me, her gentle eyes reading my thoughts. "You okay?" she asked, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I nodded, smiled, but inside I knew I was not. That night I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling. Images of my parents flashed in my mind. Dad with his trembling hands, Mom with her vacant eyes. I thought of Oak Street when we were poor but had each other. I thought of the old will, the promise that I was their pride. And I thought of Tyler, the brother once at the center of our family, now gone, leaving my parents in ruins. To me, this collapse was not just about money. It was the cost of greed, of misplaced trust, of chasing fleeting glamour while forgetting what mattered most: family. I closed my eyes trying to sleep, but the bitterness lingered in every breath. My parents believed money could buy happiness. Now they faced the truth that money not only failed to buy happiness, but tore our family apart. And I, the one pushed aside, could only watch my heart heavy with both pain and emptiness. In the days following Linda's call, I tried to return to my routine. I woke early to take Samantha to preschool, laughed with Elena in the kitchen as she brewed coffee, and signed new contracts for Harris Fix. But every night when Samantha was fast asleep and Elena curled up beside me, I thought of my parents. Once my entire world, now just faint shadows in my memories. I did not hate them, but the bitterness lingered like an old scar aching when the weather turned. My life now was a string of peaceful days. Samantha with her big round eyes and radiant smile was my light. Elena with her gentleness and patience was my anchor. My small company, Harris Fix, grew steadily, not because of its size, but because of the trust I built with every client. I stopped scrolling through Tyler's flashy social media posts or searching for my parents' names in the news. I had learned to let go, not because I stopped loving them, but because I needed to protect the happiness I had found. But one early autumn afternoon, as golden leaves fell on the quiet street outside our home, the past came knocking. I was on the living room floor playing with Samantha's wooden puzzle. She giggled, trying to fit a star-shaped piece into place while I pretended to fail just to make her laugh. The doorbell rang, a sharp sound cutting through the warm atmosphere. Elena, baking in the kitchen, called out, "Honey, can you get the door?" I stood wiping my hands on my jeans, not thinking much of it. But when I opened this door, I froze. There stood my parents, Daniel and Linda Harris. They were no longer the people from my memories, the ones who had stood in their lavish Clayton, Missouri mansion, boasting about European trips and sports cars. Dad, his hair now fully white, his face gaunt, clutched a tattered cloth bag with trembling hands. Mom, her hair disheveled and eyes red from hours of crying, looked like she had aged a decade. They stood there small and fragile like ghosts under the fading sunset. I said nothing, just stared, feeling time rewind to the Oak Street days, then fast forward to the night they erased me from their will. Ethan. Mom spoke first, her voice trembling, breaking. We are sorry. Can we talk? Dad did not look at me, his eyes fixed on his worn shoes as if ashamed to be at my doorstep. I nodded, opening the door wider, but inside a storm surged. Come in, I said evenly, trying to stay calm so Samantha would not sense anything wrong. They stepped inside slowly, as if afraid to intrude. Samantha looked up curious about the strangers, but Elena quickly scooped her up and took her to another room, leaving me with my parents in the quiet living room. I offered them a seat on the old couch, but they stood clutching the ragged bag as if it were their last possession. What is going on? I asked, though I already suspected part of the answer. Dad cleared his throat, but his voice was weak, lacking the strength of the man who once worked on the farm. Tyler, he is gone, Ethan, he said, eyes still on the floor. He took all the money and left us with nothing but debt. The apartment we rented, they evicted us. We have nowhere to go. Mom burst into sobs, her choked cries piercing my heart. Ethan, please, she said, stepping forward to grab my hand. Help us, just this once. We just need a place to stay, just temporary. I stood still, her cold hand in mine. Her plea cut open an old, healed wound, sharp but not angering. I felt only a deep pain mingled with exhaustion. I looked at Dad, the man who once called me his pride, now unable to meet my eyes. I looked at Mom, who had promised the Oak Street house would be mine now, begging me like a stranger. 5 years ago, they had pushed me out of their lives, chosen. Tyler erased me from their will, and now, with everything in ruins, they came to me. I said nothing. Walking silently to the bedroom, I opened the drawer and took out the old will, the yellowed paper with familiar creases in Mom's handwriting. It had been a symbol of trust, love, the promise that I was part of the family. I held it, my fingers tracing the lines, memories flooding back like a tidal wave. The nights I worked to exhaustion to pay Tyler's debts, the meals I skipped to buy Dad's medicine, the times Mom hugged me saying I was the strongest person she knew. And then the night they placed this will on the table saying, I was grown able to fend for myself and gave everything to Tyler. I returned to the living room, the will in my hand. My parents looked at me, their eyes a mix of hope and fear. I placed the paper on the table before them. This was your promise. I said, my voice low but clear, that I was your pride, that I deserved it all, but you chose differently. I picked up the paper, looked them in the eyes, and slowly tore it into pieces. The sound of ripping paper echoed in the silence like a final verdict. Mom sobbed, covering her face while Dad bowed his head, his shoulders trembling as if holding back tears. Ethan, you... Mom choked out, reaching for me. But I stepped back. I forgive you, I said, my voice soft but firm. I truly forgive you, because holding on to hate would only hurt me more. But forgiving does not mean forgetting. And from today, there will be no more support, no more saving. They stared, stunned. Dad finally looked up, his eyes red. Ethan, we are your parents, he said, his voice breaking. I nodded. You are. But you chose Tyler, and now Tyler is gone. I cannot fix what they broke. I picked up my phone and called a senior support center in Springfield I knew through a client. I explained the situation, and they agreed to provide my parents a temporary place to stay. I gave them the address, called a taxi, and watched them walk out. Mom clutched the tattered bag, sobbing, while Dad moved slowly, each step heavy. As the door closed, I stood still, feeling both relief and pain. The sound of tearing paper echoed in my mind, a final declaration not just of lost trust, but of the consequences that had come. As the door closed behind my parents, I stood frozen in the hallway, the sunset filtering through the window, painting the floor gold. Samantha ran to me, hugging my legs, her voice bright. "Daddy let us play more." Elena stood at the kitchen doorway, her eyes gentle but worried. I smiled, lifted Samantha, hiding the storm of emotions still churning in my chest. I had forgiven them, but that forgiveness did not erase the scars. I knew that from now on, my life and my parents would be two paths that no longer crossed. After that encounter, I heard they moved to a senior support center in Wichita. It was a modest place with small rooms, regular meals, and elderly residents quietly waiting out their days. I did not visit not because I did not want to, but because I did not know how to face them. Through old acquaintances in Springfield, I learned that Dad Daniel was quieter than ever. He would sit by the window staring at the center's small courtyard, his eyes empty as if searching for something lost. They said he no longer spoke of his farm days of Tyler, or of dreams of striking it big. There was only silence, and in that silence I knew he carried a heavy regret for pushing me out of the family, for placing his trust in the wrong person. Mom Linda grew weaker. Her health declined after years of stress after the shock of losing Tyler and their fortune. She sent me a few letters written in a shaky hand on cheap paper mailed from Wichita. They did not explicitly apologize, but every line was steeped in regret. "Ethan, I think of you every day," she wrote. "I wish things had been different." I read them but did not reply, not out of anger but because I did not know what to say. An apology, however sincere, could not erase the years I had been forgotten. Her final letter arrived on a winter morning as light snow fell outside my window. I opened it, reading each line slowly. "Ethan, my greatest regret is not losing the money, but losing the son I loved most. You are always my pride. I do not expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I love you." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside the torn pieces of the old will. I did not cry, but my chest felt heavy. I knew she meant it, but the truth came too late. Tyler vanished completely. Rumors said he was arrested in another state for fraud, but no one knew for sure. Some claimed he was living under a new name, chasing more risky ventures. To me, Tyler's name was just a faded scar in my memory, no longer painful, but never fully gone. I did not look for him or try to reach out. Tyler had chosen his path, and I had learned I could not save those who did not want saving. Meanwhile, my life went on peaceful and fulfilling. Harris. Fix My Small Company grew in trust. From small contracts, I started getting offers from major businesses in St. Louis, office buildings, hotels, even a large hospital. I did not chase lucrative deals or promise beyond my ability. I worked with the same dedication I always had, and that earned me a reputation. Tyler, with all his money and flashy words, never achieved. I lived with Elena and Samantha in a modest house on the outskirts of Springfield with a small garden full of daisies and the sound of children's laughter every afternoon. Samantha, now older, loved running through the yard, chasing butterflies or lying on the grass as I told her stories. Elena remained my rock, her gentle smile and boundless patience unwavering. She never asked about my parents or Tyler, but I knew she understood the wounds I kept hidden. "You are the strongest person I know," she once said, and those simple words were enough to keep me going. I kept my simple lifestyle unchanged despite my growing business. My old truck still took me to job sites, my stained uniform still my companion. I did not need fancy cars, mansions, or lavish trips. My happiness was in the evenings with Elena listening to Samantha talk about her school day or the times we baked together, flowers smudged on our faces. Those were moments no money could buy. Sometimes I drove past Oak Street, the old neighborhood where I grew up. The house had new owners, freshly painted, the rotting wooden fence replaced with gleaming steel. I had stopped looking through the car window, but I no longer felt resentment, only nostalgia, like a traveler glancing at an old path. I remembered the nights when wind whistled through cracked windows, the meager meals we shared, and Mom's smile when I brought money home. But I also remembered the night they placed the old will on the table, erasing me from their future. Those memories no longer hurt. They were just a story that had ended. I understood not everyone gets a second chance. My parents lost everything, not just money, but family, gratitude, and trust. Tyler chose a path of deceit, and now he was just a name in my past. But I chose differently. I did not let hatred ruin the rest of my life. My greatest fortune was not Harris Fick's success or the big contracts. It was learning to let go, to live with a free heart. The Harris family story closed in silence, a harsh reminder that money can buy many things. Luxury cars, mansions, glittering trips, but it can never buy back lost family. I stood in my garden watching Samantha play under the sun and knew I had found what mattered most. A true family one that needed no promises or wills to prove its worth. I stood in the garden watching Samantha chase butterflies under the sunlight, knowing I had found the most precious thing. A true family one that needed no promises or wills to prove its worth. Golden leaves fell gently on the grass, the autumn breeze carrying a soft chill. And Samantha's clear laughter rang out like a healing melody. Elena stepped out from the kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee, her smile as warm as morning light. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, handing me a steaming mug. I smiled, shaking my head, just grateful. But inside, I knew I was thinking of more than that. I was reflecting on my long journey, the pain, the betrayal, and the harsh lessons life had taught me. The story of the Harris family, was not just a tragedy of money and betrayal. It was a bitter reminder of the limits of filial duty and the devastating power of greed. I once believed family ties were unbreakable, that blood was an unshatterable bond. I lived by that belief through my youth. When I dropped out of school to work, when I skipped meals to pay Tyler's debts, when I fixed the leaky roof so my parents would not face winter's cold, I thought that if I sacrificed enough, family would always be my home. But life showed me a cruel truth. When people lose their morals and gratitude, even the strongest blood ties can snap. I remember the early days after my parents won the lottery. $60 million, a number that felt like a dream, a promise of happiness and ease. I was genuinely happy, believing they would finally escape years of struggle. But money, I came to realize, did not just bring opportunity. It exposed people's true natures. Dad, who once took pride in me, grew distant and harsh, as if my sacrifices were a burden he refused to acknowledge. Mom, with her dream of making it big, placed all her faith in Tyler, seeing him as the guiding light while I was cast into shadow. And Tyler, the brother I protected, turned into an arrogant man who humiliated me in front of a crowd to cement his own status. I used to ask myself, did money change them? But the more I thought, the more I realized money did not warp people. It merely revealed their hidden corners. Money was a mirror reflecting clearly what they chose to become. My parents chose to believe Tyler's empty promises, to distance themselves from me because I was too conservative, too outdated. Tyler chose glamour lavish parties and ultimately to flee with the last of the money, leaving my parents in ruins. They were not ruined by money. They ruined themselves. Sitting in the garden watching Samantha chase a butterfly, I thought about my decision to forgive. That day when my parents stood at my door, gaunt and desperate, I chose to tear up the old will, not out of revenge, but to sever the final thread of the past. Forgiveness, I realized, was not weakness. It was my way of freeing myself from resentment, of moving forward unburdened by pain. I did not forgive because they deserved it. I forgave because I deserved a peaceful life. But forgiving did not mean forgetting. I did not forget the years I worked to exhaustion the night they placed the old will on the table and said I was grown able to fend for myself. I did not forget Tyler's laughter in the mall lobby or the pitying looks from strangers. Those memories were part of me, but I learned not to let them define me. I chose to let go, not to save them, but to save myself. Through that journey, I learned that kindness only matters when paired with clarity. I once loved my family unconditionally, believing sacrifice was the only way to prove love. I dropped out of school, worked day and night, and put my needs last so my parents and Tyler could have a better life. But that blind kindness cost me myself. If I had been wiser, if I had set boundaries, perhaps I would not have carried such deep wounds. Love, I realize, does not mean giving everything. It is mutual respect. Trust built on gratitude and sincerity. Ultimately, I saw a simple but harsh truth. Family is not defined by blood. My parents were blood. Tyler was blood, but they chose to push me out of their lives. My true family I found in Elena, who stood by me with gentleness and patience, and in Samantha, who made me smile even on the darkest days. Family is those who respect me, trust me, and build a future with me, not on empty promises or fragile wills. If I had a message for the world, it would be, do not let money make you forget those who stood by you in hardship. For when trust is lost, no wealth can buy it back. I lived through the lean days when we huddled under blankets to stay warm on Oak Street. I lived through the painful days when my family turned their backs for $60 million. And I lived to see that while money can buy luxury cars, mansions, or lavish trips, it can never buy back lost family. I stepped into the garden, and lifted Samantha onto my shoulders. She laughed loudly, reaching for the falling golden leaves. Elena stood beside me, holding my hand. And in that moment, I knew I had everything I needed. The Harris family story had ended, but mine continued. A story of forgiveness, resilience, and learning to live for myself.